I want you to take a second and think of some of your favorite films. What comes to mind first? The lighting, the cinematography, the editing, maybe even the color correction? Personally, I think of the places those films have taken me. Whether it's The Shire, Gotham, Andy's Room, or Jurassic Park, these places resonate so deeply that it almost feels like I've been there before. But I find that with the amount of content coming out nowadays, there's really not many films being released that can immerse me in the same way that these films made 20 or 30 years ago do. And what I hardly ever hear anyone mention, and what I think is the key to great filmmaking, is the setting. Now, world building is a huge topic, and I know intention can be kind of a broad topic, like how do you make intentional choices, but to me, the best way to start is to reference the real world. When creating Lars' homestead for the first Star Wars, one of the things the artist referenced was desert homes. It seemed that people dug into the ground to actually avoid the heat. Similarly with Bag End and Lord of the Rings, I mean, you can see the same exact kind of influence. Sure, it's also a hole in the ground that's a home, but this one draws from rabbit holes and different things that you might see in the English countryside or Ireland. And you gotta admit, it's pretty good world building considering there's like 15,000 listings for hobbit holes, so obviously this had some influence on people. Taking something like a animal's burrow and a farmhouse, putting that together, something goes off in the human mind that makes us need it. And good world building doesn't just make us want to rent Airbnbs, it also acts as a way to tell your story. Probably one of my favorite examples of this is the Nostromo in Alien. Pulling from things like military submarines, oil rigs, cargo ships, and other sorts of dingy industrial environments, the film both creates an environment that is claustrophobic and also terrifyingly large in scale. With this added element of the environment tying directly into the fear of the film, the monster itself becomes 10 times scarier. In fact, most of the time you don't even have to show the monster, and we're still scared. Now sure, the actors are great, the story is great, and the alien design is awesome, but without that ship, I don't think the film would have been nearly as memorable. And you don't have to just use the world building and setting as a way to tell the story, but you can also tell us a lot about a character. The Millennium Falcon directly ties to Han Solo's shoot-from-the-hip personality. And Doc's lab in Back to the Future shows directly that he is a menace to society and should not be trusted around a minor like that. So sure, the story is the most important thing in a film, but the easiest way to establish that story is through the environment, not dialogue or exposition. It's always better to show than tell. But how filmmakers and artists actually create these environments directly ties into how it influences us. And one of the easiest ways to start creating those worlds is to go out and do effective location scouting. Now, the job of a location scout is pretty self-explanatory. They go out and they find real locations to shoot in. But how much care is put into that job greatly affects the final product. For example, in Lord of the Rings, while many of the settings were created by artists and set designers, a large chunk of the principal photography was actually shot in New Zealand amongst the natural environments. To find these locations, teams actually went out into the middle of nowhere and flew over with helicopters to actually survey and find the real places that match closely to the descriptions in the book. And one of the hardest to find locations in the film ended up also being one of the most accurate in the entire film series. They went in not even knowing if a place like this existed, but luckily it did, and while they did find it, actually filming there, that was a whole other challenge. For one, this place was completely in the middle of nowhere, so they actually had to build their own road to reach the environment, and once they got out there, things only got harder. The temperatures were cold, the winds were harsh, and to make it even worse, there was no infrastructure and they had to be super careful to protect the environment as it was under protection by the New Zealand government. Add on to that all the logistics that go into a film shoot this large, and the fact that they built a city from scratch on top of the hill. Needless to say, this was an extremely difficult shoot. But it can do a lot of heavy lifting for filmmakers when they're able to actually shoot in real locations that already exist. But what happens when you want to show a place that has to be built from scratch or even requires heavy modification onto a real environment? Well, call up OSHA and get a crew, because that's where set design comes in. And that crew better be wearing their hard hats. Now, some set designs are simple. They're just an apartment or a room or a space that has to be created from scratch. Some are actually feats of engineering, and some are just absolutely gigantic. Now, on the quote-unquote simpler side of set design, you can look at films like Hereditary, and while it's not the most grandiose film sets you've ever seen, the way they use those set designs to actually interlace with the story and how the character creates dollhouses is just so cool and adds to the fear and makes you feel like you're being watched the entire movie. Every time I see this effect, it blows my mind. I mean, again, they probably just had to build one room on a set, which is a couple walls, some carpet. It's nothing too complicated for set designers at this level, but when you see it done perfectly, it just elevates the film to another level. Wes Anderson also fits into this simple yet really effective set design. All throughout his films, you can see these stage-designed sort of sets where everything is horizontal, viewed from the side, and it ends up dictating how the characters move, how the cameras move, how the lighting is going to go, almost everything up and down in his films. So I think it stands as another example that with really good set design, it can make almost every decision for you. And then there's gigantic sets where the behind the scenes is almost as cool as the movie itself, and you ask yourself, how the heck did they do that? And to me, the most impressive example of this has to be The Abyss from James Cameron. For The Abyss, he actually emptied out an entire nuclear reactor and filled it up with 20 million gallons of water, and then built the underwater lab in the film inside of the nuclear reactor. And while this was insane and almost killed multiple crew members and actors in the film, I think it goes to show just how effective good set design can be, because when you watch the film and you see the characters almost drowning underwater, you actually feel that. And I think the further you go back in Hollywood history, all the way back to the Golden Age, the more you see giant sets being used as like just a regular thing. You can look at films like Cleopatra, where they built the giant Roman Forum, and also Wizard of Oz, where they built all those sets from scratch, and there's giant paintings and giant backdrops and huge sculptures and just all of these different elements put into it. And that's also the second film I've mentioned where they almost killed multiple crew members and actors, so I think that's worth noting, that something happens with set design and wanting to kill the people that are helping you make the film. And the further you go back in Hollywood history, you obviously see more and more set designs like this because there really was no other way to do it. Visual effects were not where they are today, and honestly, the way to do it was for real. And even though it saves a lot of resources and you're not killing multiple crew members and actors potentially, it's still sad to think that we're going to see less and less of this as time goes on, except for a very small percentage of movies that actually get enough funding to do giant set pieces. There's other examples of gargantuan sets in terms of the engineering that went into them. One of my favorite examples of this from back in the day would have to be 2001: A Space Odyssey with the hamster wheel, because it's just crazy to think that they built this giant rotating space station set, locked down the camera, and had a character running around it. And it's cool to see that directors like Christopher Nolan are still getting the opportunity to make visuals like this. We saw the exact same effect in Inception, and it's just so awesome when you know that the actors are actually running on the wall. It just connects on a different level. But what about when it's just simply impossible? What about when the set is too large, too grandiose, and too beyond conception to ever actually build for real? Well, even back in the day, there were solutions for this. Those solutions back then were matte paintings and miniatures. And today, while those techniques still fundamentally exist, it's all done entirely digitally, so it's something we're seeing less and less as time goes on. Now, the first technique of those two is matte painting. Now, matte painting seems to be the older of the two techniques, essentially taking from theater backdrops and other sorts of basic image-style 2D set designs. Initially, with films like Trip to the Moon, they actually did it by having a piece of glass in front of the camera, and then they would painstakingly paint the entire sheet of glass so that it would reveal a new background. And just for reference, that film came out in 1902. That's before the first flight ever happened. So the idea that we couldn't even fly and they figured out how to get us to the moon using paintings, that's crazy. And you see that technique get more and more advanced as time goes on. What you end up seeing by the Star Wars era is that they would actually matte out the area that they wanted to cover the painting with black. So when they would expose the film again, they could add in their new painting that was made later, and then they could impose it and change it and do whatever they had to do after the shoot. And because of this, you do see more sci-fi movies going deeper into world building, because now they're able to create these matte paintings a lot more easily. And you see this all over films like Star Wars and Blade Runner and Lord of the Rings, all the way up to modern films, again being done with digital effects, but at their root, the same idea. Cut part of your shot out, replace it with a matte painting. But matte painting isn't the only way to expand an environment, and the other way is my personal favorite, through miniatures. To me, there is no better example of amazing miniature work than in Blade Runner. For the film, effects artists actually came up with a really efficient way of going about shooting miniatures. For Blade Runner, they basically just made a bunch of different buildings that would take place throughout the film and make layouts of the city. After that, they would frame up their camera in the shop, shoot the same motion with the same city lined up over and over again, And after they would shoot it, because they used motion control, everything lined up, and because they had multiple passes, this made masking everything out a lot easier, made adding in real footage a whole lot easier, and it gave them a ton of control over the lighting and the mood of every single shot in the film. And this sort of application shows you that miniatures don't even just act as a way to improve a shot, they can be the shot in and of themselves. But again, sadly, nowadays, most of these techniques have been replaced by digital because you can 3D model buildings now and you can paint matte paintings in Photoshop. So we are seeing less and less of this as time goes on. And this is where the famous green screen set comes in. I mean, they have gone so far as to not even build sets. They have replaced the set design, the matte paintings, the miniatures, all of it basically with green screens. And that's why we end up with shots that look like this. With everything being done under one catch-all solution, it really kind of dilutes the process and almost makes making movies like an assembly line. I myself am a 3D animator. I have worked in it for a long time, but I know when it's gone too far and when it doesn't actually aid or benefit the final product. And not only that, but most actors and directors have very much expressed that they don't like this.
A great deal.
They broke Gandalf. And while CGI is not bad inherently, when you use it as a band-aid and a fix-all, it ends up looking like you cut corners, which makes for a bad movie. And don't get me wrong, shortcuts have been taken in the practical era, but more and more it seems like set designers and model makers and matte painters are fully replaced now by VFX artists. So when I hear the argument CGI is bad, I can't help but roll my eyes because that's just getting away from the point. The real problem is cutting corners, not putting anything into the world building. Because again, we've seen CGI that looks great. I mean, look at Avatar. That film is all CGI, but they put care into it. They put love into it. They're breaking through new ideas. And when you see love put behind something and it's not used to cut corners, then the world building works. When the world is made intentionally and not just thrown together like some collage made in Photoshop, then it starts to look good again and we actually connect with it. Conversely, I'm going to draw a point that digital effects have single-handedly brought about a new sort of indie filmmaking revolution where now filmmakers are able in their bedroom to make films that were not even possible for Hollywood 25 years ago. I think one of the best examples of somebody doing this is Ian Hubert's. If you haven't seen his work, you need to go see his work. It's absolutely incredible. Through his run and gun sort of style, Ian Hubert's has been able to make massive sci-fi movies that have stories that you would never see in mainstream filmmaking.
Newly renovated casino and eatery open 24 hours a day.
Taxi, that is way too fast!
And you see the same thing with Kane Pixels, who actually just got funded by A24 for his Backrooms film, that with no money, somebody has made within a digital environment a world that sticks with us so deeply, and it makes you wonder how studios will take hundreds of millions of dollars, shove it into a movie with all the biggest names, and it comes out looking like this. Okay, I'll chill on the Flash hate, it's just, how? But again, it's really great to see indie filmmakers starting to succeed at this type of thing because also they provide tutorials and making ofs and behind the scenes and all these different assets for people to use. But not only have digital effects become more democratized, but we're also seeing practical effects making a big comeback in the indie scene. You can see this as a prime example in the short film Slice of Life, which looks as good as Blade Runner and was made on a shoestring budget. Back in the day, to process film, to get motion control systems, to create models from scratch, these were unthinkable things, but with 3D printers and motion control systems like Edelkrone and digital effects softwares like After Effects, this stuff has become a lot easier and is now becoming realistic as well. So it's not just happening with digital effects, it's happening practically too. And a lot of the footage I actually used to explain the process that was used in Blade Runner, I used from the BTS from this film. Because it's an indie production and they're not tied to a studio, they're able to tell us how they did everything and bring us through their process and teach other filmmakers how to do the same thing. The things we can make at home are going beyond Hollywood now. And with all the difficulty getting films funded and getting out there, having a way to tell your story when maybe nobody else will let you is really cool. And it's really cool to see that on the big budget end, there is a lot of innovation still happening. I mean, look at The Volume from ILM. They were able to take digital effects, put them on video walls, and bring practical and digital together kind of as one. It takes us away from the green screen era, which thank God, and ushers in a new age of innovative filmmaking where you can merge different effects together, like set design, like matte painting, like miniatures, and like the volume to create things that audiences just haven't seen before. So seeing both on the big budget end and the small budget end, how much filmmakers have invested time, money, and effort into creating more immersive worlds, I think it goes without saying that the setting is really important. While many of the greatest films of all time get praised for their cinematography, their lighting, their editing, films are designed to immerse us in other worlds, to take us places that we've only dreamt of. And without the artists that create those worlds, a large part of film would be missing. So next time you're watching your favorite movie, look at the set design, look at the matte paintings, try to break down in your mind how they're actually doing these things, because it's really the magic behind movies. So is movie magic dead? Well, I don't know, but I think there's a lot of people fighting so that it can live another day. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought. I know some of you will disagree. Maybe you think lighting's more important. Maybe you think the shots are more important. I don't know, but that's okay. Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time, and thanks for watching.